Good evening and welcome to the People's Platform. I'm Sonali Waniga-Baduge. We thought of checking in with one of our favorite guests, who's a regular on our shows, on our network, Mr. Lasil De Silva. He's a civil society activist. He was the former director administration at the Sri Lanka Parliament. He was also secretary to the Presidential Commission on Serious Frauds and Corruption. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening to you.
Mr. De Silva, I thought it was important to just have a check-in with you, have a chat with regard to these concepts and conceptions that we believe democracy is founded upon. So let's just have a general chat on the way forward for the country vis-a-vis the rule of law, democracy, rights.
Very good.
So my first question to you is, let's speak a bit about the duty of the public sector. We know that it is incumbent that the public sector protects and provides.
You're right, very correct, very correct.
Is that merely a concept, or can we look at this in a more practical sense?
You know, you gave a very good start, because actually most of the writers, they have said it's a duty of the public sector to protect and provide. So it's a very good thing. Now what I'm trying to say, whether are we being protected and provided? Actually, it goes back to, governance, right? Governance is not easy, for that matter, and all what we need is good governance, right? If you have good governance, in my view, to make it very brief, very short, I think all that providing and protection is very easy.
And conscionability is, I think, a key trait which we sometimes tend to not prioritize, being conscionable towards one's country.
Yeah, more than that, it goes deeper, because now, in a democracy, all what we do is, we as citizens, we have a duty, because it's a representative democracy. And a representative democracy, always, there is a system, there's a constitution, there are rules, regulations, and the most important thing in a representative democracy, actually all the writers, all thinkers, philosophers, they have said, now starting from, we'll say Westminster system, right? They speak about three pillars, basically the judiciary, the legislature and the executive. So these three pillars have been entrusted with three different roles. So if all that are functional very well, I think protecting and providing is simple, and it happens because the parliament legislates. Why do they legislate? They discuss all that, they debate all that, then they frame laws. They have framed a constitution, and within the constitution they have also number of chapters. We'll say about fundamental duties and social responsibilities, chapter 6, when you talk about. Now, chapter 6 specifically lays down, how you should do that. But in Article 29, very sadly, it says, if in case these things are not being adhered to the letter, then you can't take anybody to court.
The directive principles.
Directive principles, right? So naturally, in India, directive principles are respected, adhered, and they have even given various rulings by the Supreme Court. The need to sort of respect, follow, and then on that basis make it a developed country, because the aim of all that is, justice, fair play, economic stability, this, that, and all that is stated there. Very briefly, all that is stated, providing good health, providing good education, all that. So what I'm trying to say, in a country, the most important thing is, those things, whatever said and done, the constitution, those rules, regulations, all those have to be accordingly implemented by the executive. Now, if those things don't happen in that way, actually, then the people have the right to go before the Supreme Court, the judiciary. And in Article 105, it specifically says what it is: protect, provide, and enforce. The duty of the judiciary. So, enforce for what? To protect the people. Now, there's a ruling given by, that was a speech, Chief Justice in Australia, Gregory Brennan. He had said the duty of the judiciary is not to really look after the judiciary or protect legislators or, for that matter, the executive, right? It is the duty of the judiciary to protect the citizens. So what I'm trying to say, all these institutions need to function, satisfactorily. When you see all that is being done in that way, within the framework of the Constitution, within the framework, the system, I think protection, providing all that works very well. For that matter, again, we will say it this way now, judiciary, the legislature, the executive. Now, there's another, United Nations, there's a report. The fourth pillar also has been sort of stated, that is the independent commissions and regulatory authorities, because that facilitates, again, to regularize and sort of democratically govern the whole system. But even with regard to that, we saw this electricity matter, Janaka Ratnayaka, So basic problem is our system is now being broken down to a great extent. So we have to understand it is the duty of the government. Basically, even in their case, they don't understand these principles, particularly in the parliament, because I remember, Johnny Johnston once said, this is openly in parliament. It's a matter that they should take it up seriously. If any law is proposed by them, by their party, they will pass it, enact it. So this is our parliament, naturally. That's not the way to do it. Legislation is not easy again. Legislation needs a lot of things, a long process, right? So eventually, the intended purposes should be, ultimately, it should be served. You should be able to meet all those goals. Does it happen?
So there has to be a system of checks and balances between the three organs of government, and also there can't be any usurpation.
No, you can't. Now, for that matter, now look at this. Actually, it was the right thing for the judiciary to say, okay, allocate all that, the money that has been allocated, please provide.
For the election.
For the election, right? Nothing has been done so far. That's a very serious mistake. I remember during Mahinda Rajapaksa's time, with the hedging, whatever, they said, okay, reduce the prices, right? And nothing done. And they went further. Removed the former CJ, Mrs. Shirani Bandaranaike, for not being able to, or for not giving a favorable decision in support of the then government. You can't do that, Now, I appreciate again, then now see, that is the latest, that was during Mrs. Maithripal's period, with this, change of whatever governments. Maithripal, what he did was he brought in Mahinda Rajapaksa, and that was Pereira, who, CJ, right? He said it was unconstitutional. This is how it should happen. And, we should be very happy. There have been very strong decisions given by the Supreme Court. And at this moment, our only savior, I would say, is the Supreme Court. Because now we hear about this press, those whatever laws.
The Broadcasting Regulatory Commission Act draft, then the ATA.
Now see, even the PTA that was enacted in 1978, it's totally unconstitutional, right? Parliament can't enact that kind of laws in the first place, because there's another principle called colorable laws, All what you can't do, enact directly, cannot be done or enacted indirectly in another matter, in another form, So these are there, but unfortunately nothing is being adhered. So this is the problem. That is why you call it democratic backsliding, Our country was at the top in 1948. Now see, we should be grateful to people like, say, C.W.W. Kanangara. Then now Article 52.1, I always say, says, appointments are made by the president. So naturally, public services, the public sector, the secretaries, their backbone has been completely broken down. It happens even in the other areas. The police, look at the police, right? They have a job to protect and enforce the law. I mean, nothing, I mean, is happening. The whole thing is, I would say, sorry for saying, terribly politicized.
There is a common view that the laws are being weaponized against the citizens of this country. We saw the manner in which several drafts were spoken of, the Broadcasting Regulatory Commission Act, for example, where no proper consultation had taken place with the main stakeholders before the draft was sort of introduced.
You can't do that. The laws are meant, to sort of overcome various deficiencies that are there, or maybe to control or manage, things better. Now, if they have to do, now there has been a little bit of discussion where some of those laws have been drafted, right? Actually, you have a legal draftsman, there is an attorney general, the system is in place, but they abuse all that to a great extent, right? Maybe for all purposes, no consultation even with the general public. It is very important now, like countries like USA, even in India for that matter, Now, we should talk about this. Actually, there was a war in 1776 where they fought a war with the British because they wanted independence, right? And they ended the war in 1776. And then those like James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, all of them, they are now called founding fathers, right? So they got together. Actually, it has come to a stage now, even in our case, we need a few thinkers, good people to come forward and get things organized in that way. Lay the foundation so that they will not be able to sort of break this whole system. Now look at South Africa, right? Mandela did so much, but ultimately he had disrupted the whole thing. But in USA, in 1787, they drafted a constitution. Citizens asked, what type of a government have you given to us now? He said in reply, we have given you a Republican democracy. If you can look after, if you can keep it.
Yeah.
So even in our case, we have a duty to discuss all these things, and it's very good that you're asking all these questions, and so that we can tell the public, and the public also must at least unite at this moment, because as citizens, the citizen is the most important public official in a country, in a democracy. In a democracy. So in our country, we are the most important public official. Right.
For citizen-centric governance to take place, Mr. De Silva, we need citizens who are aware of their rights,
You're right.
but not only their rights, also of their responsibilities.
And they need the knowledge, because that's a very good question again. Now, C.W. Kanangara, from an average family, right? He said education is extremely important so that they can definitely take care of whatever democratic victories they have achieved, right? So he had said education. Actually, he said you have to give the people knowledge, because education ultimately knowledge and character. Now see, Thomas Jefferson and politics and government, educating the people. He speaks in 1776. He says an enlightened citizenry is indispensable for the proper functioning of a republic. Self-government is not possible unless the citizens are educated sufficiently to enable them to exercise oversight, right? So basically these are the things, and there are so many. And our leaders, like what I told you, C.W. Kanangara, even Solberry, they did so much. Unfortunately, after we got independence, I think I would say this kind of people who were really autocratic in that sense, right? Even in a democratic system, right? They broke down all that. They have broken down everything. You can't. Now see, there's another professor, Dahl, right? He says, only problem for a politician is to refrain from doing sort of, ad hoc, authoritative things, to serve their needs. So basically what has eventually happened here in this country, they are not serving us. They are not serving you. They are not serving the country. They are serving themselves. That is why the boys in the Aragalaya came out. Now there again, now they are trying to tarnish and the names of all those people who were involved in Aragala, and they said, okay, but various things. They were, you know, druggists, this, that, and all that. No. It reminded me again, you know, an author, Albert Camus, who was really given a Nobel Prize winner. He said, revolution is a planned system to oust the government, and then, you know, French Revolution and all that. The struggle is something similar according to him. So struggle, because there was so much of burning issues, electricity, we had to wait in queues for hours. So naturally, it is not possible, because it is all because, you know, this whole system. Now see, if we had people from the 1940s, actually leaders who foresaw, this could have been a heaven by now, because, you know, now unfortunately they mismanaged. Now today, I can connect it up with this. Now this Dr. Gavin Karunaratne, there's a nice thing. When Sri Lanka commenced following the structural adjustment program in 78, Sri Lanka had a foreign debt of 750 million. Today in 2011, the debt is at 20 billion. Sunday Times 31/7 to 2011. I mean, what I'm trying to say, let's say this way, knowledge. You should be able to buy books, and that should be imparted very well in schools. Do they do that, right? So these are the problems. Actually, people have a duty, because democracy is broken. If we don't get involved to repair the democracy, we will not be doing justice to people, right? Okay. To the country. We may die. Even if you have to die, probably, right? This has to come. Media. One other thing. Thomas Jefferson, all of them, it was based on a recommendation made by Thomas Jefferson, right? After having enacted the US Constitution, the first amendment was, they had said, right, freedom of expression. Right? So there you can say anything against the government if they are wrong. Why can't we say that? Why can't we do that? Why can't we come out and protest? Right? We should be able to, we have the right. And why can't you give us that knowledge? I mean, about rogues and about corruption and all that. That's your duty, media. Right? Nobody can stop it. And we should never allow that to happen, because, now for that matter, if the media doesn't do that, this will be like a desert. Nobody will know what has gone wrong and why we are suffering. So naturally, all of you have a duty, we have a duty, we also have a duty to protect you all, fight for you all. So naturally, these are our rights. Like what I said, freedom of expression, that's an inalienable right that they can't deny. That's, you know, we have to fight for our rights, because we have so much. Now, you know, Constitution, the first chapter itself says all that. Sovereignty, all that, right? So those are our rights. They can't deny all that. Ultimately, it's the judiciary which will eventually protect us, you know, for that matter.
We're in conversation with Mr. Lassel De Silva. We're going for a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
එළඹෙන ඕනෑම මොහොතක් අලුත් දෙයක් කරන්න සුදුසුයි කියලා හිතන එක තමයි වඩාත්ම ධනාත්මක.
දැන් මූල්‍ය අරමුදලේ ගැන අපි සාකච්ඡා කරලා තියෙනවා, ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑම් එක ගැන, ඉස්සරස්ම ගැන. ඒගොල්ලෝ කියන්නේ මේකත් අවස්ථාවක්. ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට අලුත් ආරම්භයක් කරන්න.
අපි පසුගාමීව හිතන හැම මොහොතකම අපිට ඊළඟ අඩිය තියා ගැනීම ගැන ප්‍රශ්නයක් එනවා තමයි.
අර පරණ දේවල් පැත්තකට තියලා, මේ පරණ ආකල්ප පැත්තකට තියලා, අපිට වුණ වැරදි වලින් අපි ඉගෙන ගන්නත් ඕන. මේකමත් හදා බල ඉන්න බෑ. රටක් හැටියට හිතන්න ඕනේ. ඒතර අපිට එතනින් පටන් ගන්න අවස්ථාවක් තියෙනවා.
මිලින්ද සමග නියමාර්ථය ඉරිදා රාත්‍රී 10:30ට.
The local government election was sacrificed in the name of stability.
In order to achieve economic stability, there needs to be political stability in the country. What we see is, you know, things like broadcasting bill being brought, things like anti-terrorism bill being brought, high security zone acts being brought, anti-corruption bills being brought, like very, very piecemeal bills that are being brought.
We need to look at how we could democratize whole party structures of the country, and inner party democracy is a must.
Right now, the people of Sri Lanka are paying for the past.
First of all, the entire parliament has to collectively take responsibility for the follow-up in the next few years.
In 2000, the market went up We had about almost 1.5 years of a good run. From 4,300 points went up all the way to 13,500. At that time, interest rates were low, taxes were low, and all the companies were making very good profits.
Newsline, Monday to Friday at 8:30 p.m. on TV1.
අපගේ ජාතික ක්‍රිකට් කණ්ඩායමට ඉදිරියේ පැවැත්වෙන සියලුම ක්‍රිකට් තරඟ සඳහා හදවතින්ම මාගේ ප්‍රශංසාව පිරිනමන අතර ඉදිරියේදී පැවැත්වෙන ලෝක කුසලානයේදී ඔවුන්ට දක්ෂ ලෙස ක්‍රීඩා කරමින් අපගේ මව්බිම වෙත ජයග්‍රහණය ලබා ගැනීමට හැකියාව ඔවුන් වෙත ලැබේවා. Stand with the Lions.
Welcome back to the People's Platform. We're in conversation with Mr. Lassell De Silva. Mr. De Silva, before the break, we were talking about the importance of ensuring that there's an educated, aware citizenry in Sri Lanka. If we juxtapose this with the current realities of the education system, the syllabuses, the school system, the university system, we find that there are certain lacks, or there's a certain disconnect between the skill set that the students have and what's required in society, for example. And this is not just me saying this, but very highly eminent scholars. And there are a multitude of reports that have been formulated, but have those recommendations been implemented? Speak to us about this disconnect.
I'll take you back to 31 to 47, Actually, immediately after independence, Peradine University was among the first few universities, right? So naturally, the education system was so good in 1948, 9 to 60. I had those statistics also with me, say even in 77, basically ours was the highest, even more than China, even India, right? So ours was about 85, China was 65, right? So naturally, we were at the top. Our education system was superb. Now, unfortunately, we never improved the governance model so that we could have kept the scholars or at least educated people. They started migrating, brain drain. Now, it has come down to a terrible situation now. Actually, now usually you have to give 6% of the GDP for the education, right? They don't give. It's about 1.3, 1.2. Has not been more than that. So how can they? At the same time, amidst all those difficulties, there's a special commission, education services commission. Now that commission, I know for that matter, even in 2002, that was a superb report, right? Actually, we have not seen the color of the report thereafter. That, it has, because ultimately the reports have to be submitted to the president. The biggest problem is in this country is this presidency, because he's not accountable to parliament, though it says Article 43, 43 to 43 2 also says president is accountable, as even the cabinet ministers, right? But none of them are accountable. This has become a serious problem because, there is no rule of law. What I would say, the law actually has to be above everybody. Unfortunately, the law is not operational for that matter. Basic problem is that needs to be corrected. Now, what you said about the education, right? Education, even among the teachers, there are so many vacancies, right? Not so many problems. And none of those problems have been addressed by these governments because so much of, now talk about parliament. Parliament is there to rectify all that. They talk about their problems more than any other problem. So naturally, parliament has seriously flawed, and then the public sector, the politicians, even the public officer, the permanent officials can't take the stewardship to put the whole thing right, because they are completely state capture, I would say, in that sense. They have grabbed everybody under their control. Now, I know for that matter in 2015, actually, there was a mandate given, right? So when we were doing it right, ultimately they couldn't stop us, right? They kicked me out. So similarly, that has happened even in various other institutions, agriculture, right? Actually, we had the entire machinery, the system was superb in that way, but even now we maintain all that, but the outcome is nil. I mean, governance is that what matters therefore. So naturally, all what we personally need is we have to improve education. I think the political system is not committed to do all that, right? They give more facilities to members of parliament, perks, benefits and all that. Look at that independence, that's I think a security officer holding an umbrella, right? So we spend so much of money for all that. Now here, the most important thing is, there are so many burning issues, the health, all that, right? They say funds are not there, but they have all the money. They are going to even increase the cabinet of ministers. No, you can even have a smaller cabinet. Our problem is seriously flawed because public sector, we have 1.6 million, right? Even in the parliament. Look at India, 545, right? They have nearly 4 billion. Actually, I was trying to work out, if we had 1.4 billion with this kind of numbers, we should have about 10,000 or about 14,000, I can't remember specifically. So this system is wrong. Now see, even at the lowest level, Ranil increased, which was about 3,000 odd members. Ultimately, it ended up like 7,000 or something like that, right? So the political machinery and the public sector, the whole thing is totally heavy. I mean, people can't afford to. So all that needs to be cut down and probably invest all that money to create an educated society, because a knowledge society is a must. Without creating a knowledge society. Now, even at this moment, all the educated people are migrating. Naturally, they have to go because they have to think of their children. So it is very important. And what I say is the system is there, but the people who really are responsible to put all that into operation they are seriously lacking all those whatever.
There is a current program as well, I think initiated by the education minister to start this process of reform.
They have been now see, in my view, unless you reform the entire public sector, nothing can work. Because what I say is now, say our system is not Westminster system. It's a different system. Westminster system under being captured by an executive president who is mighty, Almighty God. Now that has to be corrected, right? Then again, public sector. It's called Whitehall governance model. That system requires competent people, say dedicated people who are not politically whatever involved with the current political whatever government, independent thinkers, they are professionals in that sense. Now I would say it this way, you need impartiality, integrity, Whitehall system. When you think of, it's the system that is there in Australia, Canada, England. We also had the same system. Now we have changed it to suit their requirements, but it has to be reformed or at least changed so that it will suit a system where you could do better service delivery.
Mr. De Silva, this is a thought that I've had, that if we could put aside this sense of hopelessness despite the ground realities, if we could also have a bit of hope, given the fact that there are fantastic people in Parliament, although it's just a majority, there are experts advising them. We have systems and structures in place. Maybe they're not the best, but we can sort of have some sort of faith. If we are to be solution oriented about this whole endeavor of creating a better space for us.
Like Plato said, we need philosophers. Buddha said, whatever said and done, you need people who are ethically, morally sound. Raja Bhavatu Dammiko, Raju Dahami Veva. So like that, you need better people to run governance. But at the same time, that alone does not mean that we have to restore the systems like, a strong public sector, strong judiciary, strong whatever, all that,
like,
right?
we're not stuck with only the bad guys. We also have some fantastic people.
Yeah.
So in terms of solutions, what kind of governance structure must we adopt, or how must we improve the governance structure that exists?
Very, very good question. How did we politicize the whole system? You have to destructure, or at least depoliticize the whole system, right? It's not very difficult. There are a few things, right? What we need to do, actually the public sector is what matters. All what you need to do is to ensure good governance, because when you ensure good governance, there'll be everything. Rule of law, there'll be, good use of money, there'll be public sector which is meant to do good service delivery. The whole problem is these people. Now see, Ranil Wickremesinghe in 2015 was given a mandate because he said he will ensure in 60 months, right, developed country. I have a feeling, even if you can do it, bring the... Now, it's another good thing. In 1991, in India, they had a dollar crisis. That was really because they had to put the whole thing on the track. Now, we did that in 1971, because in 1977, we were facing, dollar crisis, this, that, and all that, owing to our system failure. So in 1991, Manmohan Singh was the finance minister. Then Narasimha Rao was the prime minister. They said, you have certain reforms needed, right? What they said was, step up production, this, that, and all that, right? Reduce corruption. That was basically LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. We did all that in 1977, and 77. That is also something on the same lines. Actually, China did the same thing in 78, Deng Xiaoping. Where is China and where are we today? China, they had a very strict program. They said, okay, we will give you, and they corrected the whole thing. Ultimately, came back onto the track. Started, they said, now, thereafter, every year, GDP, growth of the economy was about 10%, right? We were never able to do all that, right? Even after ending the war. Actually, what did we do? We wasted all our energies, time, all that. Started borrowing. From 1970s, even the World Bank never gave money for consumption purposes. Our people never wanted to think of all that, and eventually we borrowed even for consumption purposes, right? Actually, these politicians are totally responsible from the 70s for the present crisis, and there's another thing. Ranil Wickremesinghe also knows. I think in 2016 I referred to the date because I had brought all that, and in that Ranil Wickremesinghe explains how ultimately Mahinda Rajapaksa had to go for elections in 2015, a few years or months before the scheduled date, right? Because we were heading for the disaster. And having undergone all that, having seen all that, having experienced all that, even at this late stage, they are not doing it genuinely for the best interest. Because this is such a lovely country. People are suffering for no fault of theirs,
Mr. De Silva, I think one of the key stakeholders of a country's tomorrow and today is its youth. Let's speak about the role of the youth, not only as voters, but also as citizens.
Yeah, actually, I think our youth nowadays, we should be very grateful to them. Now, we couldn't, I would say, do all what they did. Actually, this Aragale is a historic one, right? And when there is a problem in the country, like what I said, Albert Camus had said, naturally there will be all kinds of reactions, or at least, protests, all that, right? So the youth were, intelligently, non-violent again, right? With all that love for the country, with all that love for the future generations to come, say, stop corruption, this, that, and all that, rule of law, right? Give our monies that you have robbed and all that, right? So why did they talk about all that? Because they want a prosperous country. And in a way, what is prosperity? There should be like peace, all the facilities, and we live happily without a problem, like what you asked me about education, all that, right? So in order to create an educated, knowledge society, right?
That is inclusive.
That is inclusive. Again, even largely, right? Here without any communal law, that kind of disturbance. Now there's a very good thing. I should say, Maga publication, Dr. Godfrey Guntilaka, he had said, right, these communal rights are not needed because there won't be any problem at all. If you really think of the whole thing, it is the politicians who have been creating all the problems. And he says, if you have to create problems of that nature, ultimately everybody will pay for their sins. Now we are paying for all that sins. Now in 1965, first communal riot was there because that was a Norwegian girl or whatever, and there was a problem, and ultimately Lee Kuan Yew firmly stood up and said no communal rights hereafter, right? And he introduced systems and all that, dealt with, and fortunately all that he did. Luckily, where is Singapore now, right? Even now we have to rethink, at least build up a nation, inclusive society, so that where everybody can feel happy. And if we can do all that, I think this country, you could turn it around without any problem within a very short period, right? Even now, see, we got 2.5 billion. That's an Australian magazine, having checked with Transparency International, $2.5 billion for tsunami, right? Ultimately, out of the total amount, only 13% has been correctly invested for those tsunami victims. What happened? It came to a situation, ultimately, even the former CJ, I'm sorry, I feel sorry for him because, naturally, in this country, everything needs to be corrected, but it is possible. There's no way, as your question is, how to put it right, you can put it right. But the parliament must take the responsibility. The leaders must take the responsibility. Actually, in the first place, I think we have to abolish presidency, right? Then the three institutions, the pillars, the judiciary, the legislature, the executive, and the fourth pillar also needs to be added. I would say the fifth pillar is also needed, right? My thinking is we have to have the constitution as the first pillar. Have the constitution as the first pillar. It must be given to somebody so that it can be the custodian, because just having a pillar won't help. The Supreme Court, and we have to create another within the parliamentary system, upper house, so that every bill or every law has to be checked there and corrected, right? At the same time, Senate also responsible as a custodian to take care of the whatever constitution, right? Actually, this system could be corrected. There is no problem at all. This system could be corrected, like what we discussed earlier. There has to be certain enshrined provisions in the constitution where anyone like Ranil Wickremesinghe or Mahinda Rajapaksa can't tamper easily. It must be those enshrined provisions. Maybe you will need at least, say, what it is, a referendum or whatever. So if you can really come up with all those, safeguards and all that, this country could be definitely put on the right track.
Do you think that the independent commission system is failing in Sri Lanka?
It has failed miserably because this lady Siddhika or whoever, right, when this aflatoxin case came up, she said openly, if we had authority, we would have taken her to task, right? Because she said, we can't do that. If I had told the, maybe she said, if I had told the truth, those institutions will collapse. But her duty is to look after the people. That institutions are created for that, right? Now look at even this must be stated, right? When Gotabaya, right, was a dual citizen, right? Actually, Election Commission covered up the whole story, knowing that it was this, right? You can't do that. Election Commission is an independent authority. I mean, they can't take sides, or at least they have to stand by stand up to, look after the interests of the people and the Constitution, safeguard the Constitution, because after the 19th Amendment, there was a special whatever to say that dual citizens were not allowed. So how did ultimately they permit, right? So naturally, we need independent judiciary, we need independent public service. Actually, I would say this way, we need a constitutional setup like the Salisbury Constitution with modifications. Salisbury Plus, it has been discussed in that way. No? I think those things, if those things are introduced, definitely this country can take off within a few years, like what I told you. $2.5 billion tsunami. Even now, we might be able to bring in all the whatever investors, request them, plead with them, oh, come here, create safe conditions, you open, transparent systems. Unless you do that, there won't be. If you do that, there'll be a lot more. We can overcome all the problems within a couple of years,
All right. Thank you very much for your time, for your perspectives, Mr. Lassell De Silva. Thank you for joining us on this edition.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure.
The People's Platform. We'll see you again on Monday with the very latest. Good night.